So I call my business Quadrant 3 coaching. So if you imagine a 4-quadrant model, quadrant 1 on the bottom left says life happens to me. This is basically the victim. This is where I'm powerless. Shit happens. I got to deal with it. I spend most of my time blaming and complaining. And so quadrant 2 is what we call the achiever. And the achiever is I make life happen. And this is where you find a lot of entrepreneurs, executives, people like that. These are the clients, people I work with. Quadrant 3 we call co-creation. So quadrant 3 says, I am co-creating with something greater than me. This is about learning to operate your business and your life from the zone.
Welcome to the Art of Kaizen for Entrepreneurs, growing 1% everyday podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Art of Kaizen for Entrepreneurs podcast, where we discuss how to grow 1% every day in both business and itself. Excited for today's show with Dr. Fred Blum, the CEO and owner of Quadrant 3 Coaching, a program for entrepreneurial success. Dr. Fred Blum creates peace, purpose, and prosperity without sacrificing effectiveness. Excited to sit down with Dr. Blum and hear his advice and golden nuggets for us entrepreneurs. Thank you, Dr. Blum, for joining me today.
It's great to be here, Kyle.
You are working with some of the most difficult individuals in the world. All of us listening to this right now know that life would be much, much easier with just doing a 9-to-5 job or just being able to do something that's not 100% on our shoulders. But we decided to go into this crazy world of entrepreneurship and dive into finding our own success. But with that comes a heavy level of stress, a heavy level of tension, heavy level of anxiety. Can you give me a little background, Dr. Blum, on why you decided to go down this path of helping entrepreneurs, where your education comes from, and how you create the business that you have today?
One reason as far as why I want to work with entrepreneurs is because I am one too. So, those are the people that I know the best. And I know that path. In fact, at 62 years old, I am proud to say that I have never had a job. I have been in business for myself for my entire life. I was a holistic chiropractor for 25 years, and I've been coaching now for about 10 and a half years. So always work for myself. Don't really like other people telling me what to do. And so it was just a natural, to get into entrepreneurship. So I love coaching entrepreneurs. I know that it can be difficult. I know that there's, you defined it pretty well, that it can, come with anxiety and pressure and all that kind of stuff. And as we get on today, I have some pretty unique ways of looking at those things and talking about how they can be dealt with in a different way than I think people typically do.
Oh, very exciting. You got me excited because I mean, 31 years old, I got a family, I have one kid, and trying to grow a business every single year, the stress, the anxiety, it's always there. And one false move always lands on my shoulders, and it comes back to me, especially with my idea of extreme ownership. Everything is my fault. You know what I mean? I think most entrepreneurs have that. Talk to me a little bit about your program. Give me a breakdown of me as an entrepreneur. Obviously, I'm an ideal customer for you. Why would I join your program? What is the benefits? What's the value behind it?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, how hard do you want this to be? How hard do you need it to be as an entrepreneur? So I have this crazy idea that we can be like, what I call overachievers, high performers and overachievers, and still operate from a place of peace and clarity and well-being. I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I think it's almost, and not in a healthy way, I think it's almost being baked in to a lot of this entrepreneur hustle culture that you see, where people are bragging about how little sleep they get, how much time they spend at the office. I'm not here for that. That's all I want to say. That's not my program. I think that, and it's not even about how many hours you put in. Like in the beginning, you may put in 16-hour days. That may be your thing. And, you've got a wife, and I'm assuming your children are young. So you don't want to miss that either, man. I mean, I could tell you this much, those years you don't get back. So, we don't want to say, well, I'm building something. No, we want to make sure we have balance in our life. But at the end of the day, the real peace, the real freedom that I speak of is in here. You're not going to find it in your next big, sale or whatever it is that you're offering. You're not going to find it in your first million. You're not going to find it in some cool toy that you buy. Not that I want to be clear that those things, there's anything wrong with those things. Go make $1 million, buy a cool car, do whatever it is that you think will be fun for you. But don't mistake that for the real true fulfillment, which the good news is that's intrinsic. The bad news is you probably don't know that it's there. Like we've been conditioned to find it out there. We've been conditioned to believe that happiness comes from achievement or money or even from family. And again, nothing wrong with any of those things. But if you constantly have to find it out there, then what you'll discover, if you haven't already discovered this, is that it becomes what I call more, better, next. There's always got to be the next thing. In other words, it's very short-lived, right? Does that make sense? It's like you're going to
100%.
you're going to be looking for the next win, the next accomplishment, the next whatever, the next high.
Yeah, and I think us all entrepreneurs feel it, right? Like you get your business to a certain revenue, and the only person you have to slap on your back is yourself. You know what I mean? Like maybe you have some partners in the business or something of that nature. You can celebrate for a little bit, but you know, it's a feeling that I think both drives us to be better, but it's also intoxicating into the point of like, we all, maybe you guys listening to this, you enjoy a drink of alcohol and maybe one or two and you feel great, but next thing you know, you put 6 or 7 down, you're not great anymore, right? It starts eating at you internally and pulling you apart. And entrepreneurship, I believe, is the same way. If we search and search and search for the next better best and just keep trying to improve, we don't we don't see our affirmations. We don't see the positivity of what we're developing. And for the listeners out there, you said this is found within yourself, within you, right? And inside of your internal process. Talk us through that. When you meet someone for the first time, I'd love to hear
Absolutely.
how you pull that out of them.
Yeah, and this is the thing, and I guess I realized I was gesturing, I wasn't saying it. So, yes, inside yourself, that there is a source of peace and happiness and freedom and clarity and joy that is built in to every human being. I mean, look, I'll be honest. I'm referring to what I would call a spiritual dimension of human beings. So I don't want to hide that. Now, it's not religious, which means whether you're religious or not, this could resonate with you. It's something that you just begin to notice. There's something about me that transcends my thinking, my psychology, all the stuff we were joking before this podcast began about my one of my brands, which is personal undevelopment. Because the idea, you've got a library of books. I've got, books everywhere in my house. 99% of personal development, in my experience, seeks to develop what I call the ego, which is there's nothing wrong with the ego. I want to be clear. The ego is not your enemy, but at the same time, it is not who you really are. The ego is an identity that you and I and everyone creates when we're very young, like maybe 2 years old, out of fear and insecurity. Like the shorthand version of this is that we're 2 years old, still so pure, so innocent, and we find ourselves in a world that is coming at us like a freight train. And our unconscious mind, which is very powerful, builds this ego as a buffer between ourselves and the world, a way to stay safe. And over the next 4 to 6 years, you add all kinds of layers and nuances to that ego that give you some sense of this is who I am, except that it was never who you are, who you were. It's a mask that you put on that you forgot that you put on. And so the ego is the part of us often that is striving and seeking and trying to get better. And that's why personal undevelopment, because what I found is that what we're really looking for, like true freedom and love and clarity, is part of our true self, not our ego. Does that make sense?
Super powerful. Yes. And two things come to mind for me. Eckhart Tolle. I've read a lot of his works and his understanding of the psychology and the ego compared to the psychological breakdown, compared to the emotional breakdown within your mind and being able.
He talks about the pain bottom.
Yes. Yes. And be able to find that enlightenment above all three, where you can recognize all three and be able to understand this is my ego, this is my emotion, this is my sense of now. And then, one of my favorite books, The Four Agreements, right? The agreements that we make with ourselves throughout our life that makes us feel who we are and what is right when truly and actually, like you said earlier, those people you're looking at social media that's getting 5 hours of sleep and working 19 hours a day, is that truly happiness? Is that really, are they striving? Like, I'm a work nerd, right? I'll put in 12 hours and I'll love it, but that's not because I'm loving the work. I have fallen in love with the hustle of the work. I enjoy, as Alex Ramosi normally says, the pain of the process. I know that the pain will just lead to a bigger and bigger dragon that I get to conquer at one day. But it took me years of stress and I mean, I'm losing my hair as we speak, right? In the process of learning this stuff and trying to still fight it, and every day I have to remind myself. Talk a little bit about how your program is different. I wanna understand the uniqueness of all the things you're bringing in and how it separates itself from any other coaching program or entrepreneur developmental program.
Sure. Well, there's a couple of ways I can answer that. We'll see how many we get to here. But so I call my business Quadrant 3 coaching. So if you imagine a 4 quadrant model on the bottom left, and this is my adaptation from a group called Conscious Leadership. If you haven't seen this before, I just want to give them credit that quadrant 1 on the bottom left says life happens to me. This is basically the victim. This is where I'm powerless. Shit happens. I got to deal with it. I spend most of my time blaming and complaining. And the way out of that model, the way out of that framework or position is there's 2 parts to it, really. One is humility, because very often you find underneath the blaming and complaining, there's a weird kind of arrogance in those people. So sometimes they need to just get humble and say, God, I'm really struggling. And when they can say, this is hard, man. I'm really struggling. And I maybe even see the pattern of this in my life. Now, the actual exit into the next quadrant is responsibility, where you finally can say, okay, I'm going to take responsibility for my life, and what I create is up to me. And so quadrant 2 is what we call the achiever. And the achiever is I make life happen. And this is where you find a lot of entrepreneurs, executives, people like that. These are the clients, people I work with. Pro athletes, I've worked with a couple of those. And these are the people, the hustle culture, man, the hours that you put in. And it's all about creating a life through the force of my own will. So that's quadrant 2. It can be from quadrant 1, it's a huge upgrade. And there's a feeling of empowerment. And what it really does is it boosts your ego. This is why quadrant 2 people, they've read all the self-help books, because that stuff feeds quadrant 2 life. It feeds that sense of will and energy. And I make life happen. If it is to be, it is up to me. That's quadrant 2. Okay. And that can be and should be really exciting and powerful for a while. And at a certain point, for many people, I mean, certainly the people I work with, it gets to a point where a common term that we use is burnout. We get to a place where it feels like the business is taking more energy from me than it's giving me. You see, like I'm getting whatever rewards. I had one client in particular, I've had several multimillionaire clients, and one in particular was worth $90 million. And I sat down with this man. He was a real estate developer in New York City. And and the very first words he said to me were, I'm worth $90 million. And he didn't say it to brag. He said it to illustrate the point that he was worth $90 million and he was miserable. And he spoke for about 8 or 9 minutes straight and just went on and on about how nobody understood him. Nobody knew what struggles he went through, how hard he worked, all the pressure he was under. And I just sat there and nodded my head for 8 or 9 minutes. And finally, I don't know what possessed me to do this, because frankly, this man, his name is Leon, was quite intimidating, as you can imagine. Somewhere, I just put up my hand like this, and Leon stopped mid-sentence. And I don't know what came out of my mouth. I don't know where it came from. But I said, Leon, what if you could have everything in your life that you've worked so hard for and still have peace in your heart? And Leon started to cry. And I could tell you, in my experience, Leon was not a man who cried. Leon was a man who made lots of other people cry. But he had never considered this like a possibility, that you could have the work and the peace. He thought he had already gone down this one pathway and it was too far to go back and get the peace now. Like it was a different path. And I'm saying they're not a different path. They can run parallel to each other, And that's the message, is that the peace that we seek, the freedom, the well-being, the self-esteem, or let's be honest, if we're talking from the ego's perspective, the worthiness, just that feeling that I'm not a piece of shit, because that's what egos believe. Okay. So if you're coming from ego, there's always this sense, and this is quadrant 2, that we're trying to prove something. You're going to prove your 4th grade teacher who said you'd never amount to anything wrong, or whatever it is. So at a certain point, it's like there's nothing left to prove, but you still aren't feeling it. You know what I mean? And this is the shift from quadrant 2 to quadrant 3, or at least this is what becomes available. because quadrant 3 we call co-creation. So quadrant 3 says, I am co-creating with something greater than me. And this is where it's going to get a little woo-woo for some people. But whether you want to call it co-creating with life, which is a very simple term, or the universe, or God, I don't really care what you call it. But at the end of the day, you're calling in a larger force than just your mind and your will. And that's what I call the shift from force into flow. So people talk about flow states, they talk about the zone. This is about learning to operate your business and your life from the zone. Okay.
Oh,
But this,
how powerful. I mean, Dr. Blum, I think of Tim Ferriss, right? Tim Ferriss, the author of Relentless, who talks about the flow state and how these athletes, and really focused around athletes and the positioning that they've had in their life and how they enter into that flow state, which is normally where the flow state is brought up. But us as entrepreneurs, we feel it too. But let's just go through those stages real quick, those quadrants that you talked about. That first quadrant of life happens to you, which I see for 90% of the world, right? And the breaking out of that, which is super powerful, which is being humble enough to understand that you need to learn more. And then, as you said, everyone in quadrant 2, once they've surpassed quadrant 1, they've read the self-development books. They've gone after knowledge. They've acquired information to be a better person. When we read entrepreneurial books, it's not so that we can start the best business. It's so how we can be a better entrepreneur, a better leader, business owner, right? And then you're in that quadrant 2. Your ego's on fire. You're growing as an individual. You're learning more. You're feeling the strength of success and power. But as that comes, as the ego starts building up better and bigger, I wouldn't say better, but bigger than yourself, right? Your ego comes to a point where it's involved your health, your happiness, your family, that ego of that mission that you wanted to go after, to be an entrepreneur, to be a C-level executive, whatever it might be, starts encompassing everything about yourself. And you're saying to surpass that positioning, you have to realize it's not all about you. It's bigger than you. It's more than just you. Is that accurate?
well, I was going to share the word, right? So if the word to move from quadrant 1 to 2 is responsibility, humility and responsibility, really. To get from 2 to 3, it's surrender. And that's a hard one because the ego, that's like kryptonite for the ego. It's like, whoa, I just built this whole self-image. I just like created this idea that I'm a big deal. And now suddenly I have to begin to let that go. Now, it does mean you have to become nothing. That's quadrant 4, actually. But quadrant 3 is where you recognize that I can let go of the wheel, like that white knuckle grip on the steering wheel a little bit. And I can trust, Another way to describe this is I shift from problem solving to creation. And it's a very powerful thing. And the way to get there, and see, this is what you asked me about. What is the key? How do you do this? Is through deep inner work. This is where self-help will not take you, because self-help, like I said, 95% is designed to develop the ego. So personal undevelopment means we have to not take all the value that you got from that self-help. And there's a lot, but it began to reinforce something that isn't really who you are. So it reinforces a myth or a lie that you have to see through in order to step into this third quadrant. And the way to do that, primary tool, there are many tools, but one of the primary tools certainly is something I call self-inquiry. And self-inquiry is asking really hard questions about who you are, about why you're doing this, about what really matters to you. And these answers require that you question some of the unquestioned or unexamined beliefs that got you to this point. So that's a big part of what I do, is I help people to look deeper into themselves until they find on the other side of some of these stories that we tell, there's a much deeper source of strength and peace and wisdom. And that's what I call the true self. And it's a spiritual reality. It's not the physical world that we live in most of the time.
That's super, super powerful. I personally have gone down and trying to go down this path every single day, and it is difficult, right? It's very, very difficult because, as you said, the word for it is surrender, right? To be.
Oh yeah, I was just going to ask you, what do you find difficult?
The difficulty is the fact that, and I think all the entrepreneurs and business owners listening to this can agree with this, is that you find success around something that you're doing. This form of ego that you build in with yourself. And once you label that as, this is what I have to do to be successful, I have to work these 16-hour days. I have to sacrifice sleep. I have to give time. I have to bend a knee at certain things. I have to become this person to be the success that I want to be. It's very difficult to then say that I was wrong, right? And that
But
swab
it's
is
not wrong. It's not wrong. You may need to, I mean, there's no substitute at certain points in this game, especially in the beginning, for just hard work. So that's not what I'm pointing to here. It's the inner motivation that drives us that may not be always the healthiest place. This is why Leon builds a $90 million business and he hates his life, because what drove him to build this business was some sense of inferiority. This is the crazy thing. You look at this guy and you think, oh my God, he's it. And he's walking around just as insecure, maybe more so than the other person, because he had to build a $90 million business to hide it. You see what I'm saying? So that's the part that we look at, not the external, not the behavior. The behavior and stuff is important. But if we don't get clear, like you said, you like Simon Sinek, right? If you don't get clear about what your true why is, then the whole thing is going to be like a house of cards for you. Or I like to say, like the old Westerns, in the old days, it looked like you're walking through the old town. And so you've got like a hotel and a bar here, and on this side is the bank and the saloon. Really, they're like facades held up by 2x4s. And that's what life starts to look like. It's just a facade.
Dr. Blum, I have a question for you. I want to know what you think about this practice that I've been going through. I took this from a program called Upgrade a few years ago that has helped me really establish my why, and something that I do annually, every single year. I write down a 99-year goal. So I go into a goal structure that is much longer than the lifetime that I will last on this earth. Common day medicine, no one really knows anymore. But at the end of the day, I have to think about what I will leave to this world and kind of what I leave behind, the impression. And that's really restructured what my why is, right? And
So it's a legacy kind of question for you. Okay.
yes, exactly. Is that something that you do in your practice?
It can be. Okay. But I'm actually, see, when we get into this space that I refer to as the true self, which is Eckhart Tolle refers to it as the present moment, basically. It's a little bit more challenging to make a 99-year plan, because you begin to have a sense of this right here. This is really all I have. See, life is not a sequence of present moments. It is this moment only now. And so when we learn to fully inhabit, to step into this moment fully, in other words, not in our heads and in our goals and our vision. I'm not saying, again, I keep saying, not that those things are wrong. We just need to be able to step into now more fully. And you begin to find that there is a peacefulness and a presence here that it's like this has everything we want in it right now. And it takes out this sense of not enoughness. So then from this place, this is what I mean by freedom, you see? The freedom to truly choose your future without some kind of brokenness that I have to fix in myself, because every ego feels like it's broken. So I don't want you or our listeners or anyone to have to run down, like finally achieve whatever we want to achieve so that we'll finally feel good about ourselves. I want you to be able to start from that place of fulfillment and well-being, and to be able to then, what I say is, when you really get that, life becomes a game. And what I mean by a game is you get to choose what winning and losing looks like. You see, it's like someone made up, 100 and something years ago, that it's better to hit the ball with the stick than to miss the ball with the stick. You see what I mean? It's a game. We call it baseball. Can you think of anything intrinsically less valuable than hitting a ball with a stick? You see what I mean? But we made it up. It's a game that we decided to create, or someone decided to create, Abner Doubleday. And now we know what winning and losing looks like. So we can play full out inside of these completely arbitrary rules. When you have that sense of freedom in yourself, which can only come through transcending, through seeing through the stories and the lies that your ego has made up about what life is about. When you see through that, the fear and the insecurity of the ego, you get to make it up. And then, you know how you decide what you want to create in your life? Honestly, two things. One you've already touched on, which is what would be the greatest contribution to my family, to the planet, to whatever. And that is obviously legit and important. And the second one is what looks like fun, okay? I want to make $1 million. Why? Is it so you can finally prove your parents wrong or, whatever? No, man, I just think it'd be really fun to make $1 million, and drive a cool car and go take cool vacations. I mean, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with like your mission in life being fun and contribution? You see what I mean?
Oh, 100%. For the entrepreneurs and business owners listening to this right now, I would ask to rewind, listen to his explanation of the four different quadrants, especially the separation between quadrant one, quadrant two, and quadrant three, which is where Dr. Fred Blum is really working to get people from quadrant two into quadrant three so that they, as you said, surrender, right? Be able to have that peace and that tranquility and still the effectiveness, the success that they're striving to get. Yes, they're, aligned with each other. We have just been we've not proven, but we've been told throughout the years that they you can't have both, which I think is a farce. I for my entire life was like, "Man, at 31, I gotta be happy. I'm making money now. I've been poor my entire life. If I'm making money, I should be able to enjoy the process of the money making at the same time." And I believe a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners feel the same exact way. I have to ask Dr. Blum, if somebody is listening to this and they're sitting in quadrant two right now, they're an entrepreneur, they're a business owner, they're working hard, they're fighting. What would be the first steps to surrender?
Yeah. Well, we talked about it a few minutes ago. Look, this idea of self inquiry, it's so simple that it's easy to miss. See, the idea is in quadrant two, it's about adding skills and ideas and beliefs and self esteem and self confidence. In quadrant three, it's about subtracting. So there's two basic methods of self inquiry. There's the one that's more well known, which is more done with the mind. So you ask questions. You ask, what really do I want here? Why am I creating this? And you're trying to uncover, honestly, which makes it a little difficult or challenging, is you're trying to uncover the hidden motivation, the part of you that's scared, the part of you that feels insecure and that you're trying to do this to prove something. You want to be able to see that. And the ego does not want you to see this because that's its game. And again, the ego is not the enemy. You created it. We all created it to try and feel safe, but now maybe it's not best serving us anymore in our quest for true happiness. So one version is this intellectual version of asking questions, and there are methods to that, which, we could get into, but it gets a little more complex. The second method, which is something that I'm mostly developing on my own, is what I call somatic self-inquiry. Somatic meaning body. And I have a belief here that I think I can't tell you for sure that it's true, but I think it's useful. And that is uh, that, there's a question that you may have heard before. Does life happen to us or for us? Have you heard that question? So I can't prove to you that either one of those are true. In other words, you could cherry pick evidence to prove either one of those things if you like. I choose, as I suspect you do, life happens for me. Now, I'm going to suggest that if you're going to choose that you choose it 100%. Not like, oh, I got a great parking place. Life is happening for me. Oh, I got a parking ticket. Life's happening to me. So just like own it and don't know. You're not always going to understand how life is happening for you, but just trust that somehow life always has your back. Now, this is part of how you get to quadrant three is that you surrender some of your and making everything happen to life has my back. You see? You see how that requires some degree of surrender. Now, with this idea that life happens for me, when you think about anything in your life that is stressing you out, that you feel unresolved with or challenged by, maybe it's another person, maybe it's something in your business, maybe it's something in yourself. We all have those things too. Every single time there's going to be a feeling in your body that is directly related to that thought in your mind. Does that make sense? You've had this, you know what I'm talking about. So I suggest that this feeling is not random, but it is the exact somatic representation of this thought or this experience in your life. Now, I'm going to take it one step further. You think about X. I wish I had, a more successful business. And you feel some kind of tension in here. That is life showing you exactly what you need. Like the solution is encoded into this tension, this energy that you're holding in your body. Now, it's not encoded like steps, like a marketing plan or something. It's encoded as how you can get free from this egoic pattern that makes you feel small, that makes you feel like you're not enough or something like that. And so what I do with my clients is I help them to meet this experience of the way this lives in their body. Whatever they're challenged with in their life that it lives in here, when they can meet this experience in a particular way that I take them through, what happens is that tension in their body opens like a doorway. And that's when I say they meet this deeper, wiser place in them. And there they find answers and they find something that they couldn't find out there searching for it in the world. And from there, this is this state of flow and peace and ease that allows them to take that next step in their life with a whole different level of understanding.
For entrepreneurs and business owners listening to this right now, I mean, you definitely got to rewind this and listen to it again. It's powerful for all facets. And if you look at any successful entrepreneur or business owner that has truly made it, I'm not talking about the roofing company where the guy was a great roofer and he started a $12 million business and he works at it every single day. I'm talking about Steve Jobs. I'm talking about Jeff Bezos. I'm talking about the individuals that could push themselves down to give people the rise above them. They always give it to their employees, or always gives it to their staff, or always give it to the people that are around them. You hear these people talking on stage and how humble they are and how much they are not taking it as their own personal success. It was something much larger than that. And Dr. Fred Blum is not only doing this today on this podcast, but helping people every single day execute this to go from, as we said, from quadrant 2, where you are a successful, striving entrepreneur, but you feel the stress, you feel the burnout, you feel the problems, to quadrant 3, where you're still seeing the same level of success, you're still growing, but you're at peace and you're finding a level of happiness within yourself. Dr. Brum, I have one final question for you. You personally, not so much in your practice, but you personally, how do you find your Kaizen? For the listeners out there, Kaizen is a Japanese business philosophy that means 1% improvement every single day, or taking small steps towards a larger goal. What are you doing, Dr. Blum, in your day-to-day life that allows you to constantly be striving to be improving yourself and going forward while still holding on to that sense of love and that sense of self?
I'm really fortunate in that way, Kyle, in that I have created a business that allows me to be in this conversation for several hours most days. And there's a magical thing that happens when you connect with another human being at this level of true self. Is that it creates what I call the bubble. There's like you could be 1,000 miles away from me and in like on a Zoom call or whatever, and you'll feel it. Like the whole space shifts and it becomes more still and more peaceful. And in those moments, I know like I might get lucky in a coaching conversation and say one or two things that actually resonate with that person. But I know that if we sit in that bubble together long enough, the work is going to get done because it's literally, I believe at least, rewriting your nervous system. And so I get to do that for hours, many days. And then on my own, if I'm not doing that, I have my own practices. I've been martial artist for almost 50 years. I do practice martial arts and meditation and qigong and things like that on a daily basis. Honestly, you want to have an awesome life, especially the inner side of that life. It's not quite a full-time job, but it takes you got to put some time into it, you know? The good news is if you do really good work in the way that we're talking about here, it's going to yield the kind of dividends that you just can't get anywhere else.
Dr. Fred Blum, thank you so much. Again, for all the listeners out there, the entrepreneurs listening to this right now and is like, yes, I am burnt out. Yes, I am dealing with the stress. I'm working hard. How do they find you? How do they get connected with you?
This is what I found. It's like the easiest way to see if if you're in the appropriate place in your life to have this conversation. Because frankly, if quadrant 2 is still giving you a ton of energy and you're loving the hustle, keep that up. Okay. For real. Like you'll come to a point where this is going to make more sense to you. Interestingly enough, parenthetically, I didn't expect this, but I'm finding that I'm getting more clients in sort of your age group, like in their 30s, which surprises me because I thought that it would have been more the 40s and the 50s, right? And of course, I see people in that age too. But like one of my more recent clients is 34, and he's a realtor, luxury realtor. He's killing it. He was telling me the other day he's got like 15 listings that he's working with. Most realtors have like 4. But when he came to work with me, now I think we're in about our 4th month, he said, I'm 34 and I'm doing great. But is this the next 30 years of my life? Like he just didn't see that that didn't feel like that was his thing. So, I appreciate it when, like having a conversation with someone like yourself who is really looking at these questions now rather than waiting for the burnout to occur and then say, oh crap, now what do I do? So with that in mind, basically the first conversation is always on me. I I'll sit down with just about anybody for an hour. I want to emphasize it is not a sales pitch. It's not this thing, with all due respect, a lot of coaches do this. I do not like this, where they spend an hour or 30 minutes trying to show you how messed up you are so that you need them. That isn't my objective here. My objective would be to be as much service as I can be for that time. And then if you want more, all you have to do is ask. Because honestly, if you don't ask, I'm not even going to bring it up. It's not like you don't know how to ask. I want to see first how much I could be of value to you. And then if you want more, you can always ask me for it. So that's the offer. And then as far as finding me, I think the easiest way right now is go to my website, which is personalundevelopment.com. That's in the process of being rebranded. We're going to create a whole new Quadrant 3 coaching website. But for now, you can go there, personalundevelopment.com. And there's a link that you can click to set up some time with me. And I would be delighted to speak to anyone listening who's like, if anything I've said resonates with them, that's why I'm.
I absolutely love it. All that information is going to be found below in the description. Dr. Fred Blum, the CEO and owner of Quadrant 3 Coaching, thank you so much for the immense amount of golden nuggets, the understanding of the psychology of us entrepreneurs, and assisting us with understanding that we do need to work hard, we do need to strive, but we don't need to do it in an environment that is stressful and daunting to our lives, that there is a better path forward, and you're helping people do that every single day. Thank you again. For the listeners out there, if you finish this podcast, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next Kaizen podcast.